Hi, everyone that's with us. Um, as you can probably see, you're muted for now, but if you have questions, hopefully I'll be able to hear from you later. Miles, you're looking sharp. Hi, Brian. I know y'all are muted, so feel free to chat back. I feel like these are the early risers of the group. We're all here. Hi, Kate. Mitzi, thanks for joining us. Hi, Jeremy. You're muted, but I just wanted to let you know I see you. Hi, Eli. And hi, Emmy. Hi, Michael. And hi, Mike Ziri. Everybody's on mute right now, but I'm trying to greet people as they join. I don't know about y'all, but this is my first big Zoom, and I feel like I'm in a giant Brady Bunch. Hi, Kim. So as everybody gets logged on here, we're going to give folks just a few minutes. Once I see that our special guests are here, we'll get things rolling. Hi, Manny. Feel free to use the chat function at any time, because I do have folks muted just for convenience sake at this point. Hi, Representative Cassidy. Thanks for joining us. You're muted for right now, but I'll unmute you soon. Hi, Terry. All right, folks. We're going to wait 2 minutes. Hi, Maggie. Hi, Butch. Thanks for joining us. We're waiting for Senator Menard. All right. While we get going, I just want to introduce myself. My name is Emily Boyce. I am the Development Director at Equality Illinois. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. I'm calling today from my apartment in Logan Square. I am so happy to have all of you with us today. We're hoping that this series proves informative and useful for everybody while we're all stuck in our respective homes. And I'm gonna let our esteemed CEO, Brian Johnson, kick us off with some more info about this series and what we're trying to do, as well as info about our speakers. So I'm gonna unmute Brian, a privilege of mine, and I'll let him welcome y'all. Thanks. Okay, Brian, you should be good to go.
Great, can everybody hear me? Wonderful. I was looking forward to this town hall, and then I see all your faces, and I'm really happy that we're doing this town hall. It makes me feel so connected to our community. So Once again, my name is Brian Johnson. My pronouns are he, him, and his, and I live in the Lincoln Square neighborhood of Chicago. Before we dive in, let me just say happy Trans Day of Visibility. To our trans brothers, sisters, and siblings in the movement, we see you, and we are just so grateful to have you as leaders in our community. So Equality Illinois is excited to have you join us for our first remote town hall in response to the COVID-19 crisis. And we came up with this idea with the hope of doing three things. So number one is we just want to offer reliable information and actionable next steps on key topics. Two, we want to connect you, our partners, to leaders and experts in the fields of responding to this crisis. And three, we want to find ways to gather even virtually in what for many of us is an isolating environment. So before I go on, an important announcement, I want to mention that we do have media on this call. So if you do not want your face or name shared, please mute your video and change your screen name. Today's town hall will go on till about 2:30. I'm going to first tell you a little bit about our guests, and then each guest will have time to speak. And hopefully most of the call in the back end will be for question and answer. If you'd like to submit your questions for the Q&A portion, please enter them into the chat function on the side of your screen. You can do that at any time. And when it's time for Q&A, Emily will ask select individuals who have written a question to ask the question directly of our guest. So she will unmute you at that point. And my final request as we move into introductions is that since this is first in a weekly series of town halls, we're admittedly new at this. So I hope you can extend us some grace and patience as we delve into this new way of gathering as a community. All right, let me move on to our speakers. So Senator Andy Menard is a state senator from Bunker Hill in Macoupin County. Prior to being elected to the Illinois Senate in 2012, he has served as the Macoupin County Board Chair and Mayor of Bunker Hill. And in the Senate, he serves as the chair of one of the Senate's two budget committees. Senator Menard, as many of us on this town hall know, has been a long-standing and fierce ally of the LGBTQ community during his tenure in the Senate. It is hard to boil down an introduction for Representative Cassidy into a few sentences, but she does represent the Chicago communities of Rogers Park and Edgewater in the Illinois House of Representatives. Prior to serving in the General Assembly, she built a career as a legislative director and an organizer. And she has been, as so many of us know, a leader in many recent pieces of legislation that have improved the lives of our community, from marriage equality to the conversion therapy ban and the Reproductive Health Act. So I'm going to start by asking Senator Menard and Representative Cassidy just to give some introductory remarks for a few minutes each in response to three questions, and I'll put them out there and then you all take it as you think makes the most sense. So the three kickoff questions are, what is the current status of the governor's response to COVID-19 in Illinois? What is the General Assembly planning to do to respond to COVID-19 this spring? And what should LGBTQ people and our allies know and be doing right now? So Senator Menard, I will start with you.
Well, thanks, Brian. Hopefully, can you hear me? This is
Yes.
Gotcha. Good. Thank you for inviting me on the call. I appreciate you reaching out. This has been a whirlwind, I think, for everybody. Certainly for us downstate, it's presenting challenges on any number of fronts. So appreciate you opening up the forum and inviting me just to have a few words and to take questions and to hear people's concerns. So I'll go briefly through the three questions, starting with the governor's response. In my opinion, it's been overwhelming. I think the governor has time and again shown that despite the curveballs and all of the different aspects of what it's like to deal with the pandemic on a statewide level, I think the administration so far has done a really good job at moving government in the right direction, which always seems to be a challenge. But the Pritzker administration, at least from my perspective, has done a pretty good job of moving things in the right way, literally in real time. And I'll just give you this one example. The state budget provides money for transportation services for schools. And obviously, students aren't going to school right now. So yesterday, the administration filed emergency rules, which is a procedural thing that we expect in times like this, to allow transportation money to schools to be used for things like delivering meals to children, or delivering, in some cases, work to children, especially in places in the state that have challenges with being connected to the internet. That was a real-time change that didn't get a headline, that nobody really saw, but it made a real positive impact. That's just one thing way down in the weeds that the administration has done in what undoubtedly is a list of thousands of things since we've gone down this path with COVID-19. So much of my time has been dealing with those types of things in the 48th Senate District. Another thing I've seen, which I think would lead into probably the third and final question, is I've seen the administration do a good job of, I don't know if I would use this term too often, but weaponizing the state budget. We have about a quarter left in the fiscal year, and there's appropriations that are unspent today, and the administration has moved that in the direction of complete response to COVID-19. There's still some more things they can do, but I've seen that in a very good concerted effort, not just with the Department of Public Health, but with the Department of Human Services, with other agencies that I think we are more used to seeing respond to crises. But they're utilizing every dollar in the state budget, and that's been, I think, a role that legislators have played in recent weeks. And then finally, I think the health response has been the most, the most productive. I would tell you, in downstate, in the 48th district, half of my district lives in urban neighborhoods. The other half lives in rural communities and very small towns, and testing in those rural areas is almost non-existent, I would tell everyone. It is almost impossible to get a COVID-19 test in rural counties and downstate, and that's because of the CDC guidelines. It's nothing that we've done as a state, it's because of the CDC. That's top of my list each and every day. So I would expect that we would have a narrow window in the coming weeks. I don't think there's a crystal ball that answers the question on what the legislature is going to do and when we're going to do it. But I think in the coming weeks, we'll have a narrow window to take up a short list of items. And at the top of that list would be the budget. And obviously, everything that relates to the budget would be impacted potentially. And that's something that we're all going to have to keep an eye on and advocate for when that time comes.
Great. It's a little bit, I feel kind of like everyone's grandfather on this a little bit. I can't quite get this to work as quickly as possible. Let's kick it over to Representative Cassidy.
Great, thanks everybody. First of all, to the folks at Equality Illinois, thank you for giving me a reason to put on lipstick. It's very easy to make the bathrobe the uniform, so I appreciate you guys for giving me this little oomph. And Brian, when talking about my legislative accomplishments, I was certain you were going to call out the way lives have been improved by the legalization of cannabis. Because I've really lost track of how many times in the last couple of weeks I've said, thank God I got that bill passed. But, a little PSA there, stick with the edibles right now. COVID has some lung issues. If you're gonna give it a shot, maybe try some alternative delivery methods while we're watching out for our lung health. And, in all seriousness, to echo Senator Menard's response. And I also have to say, it's so weird for all of us to not be together right now. And so getting to do things with our colleagues that we don't live near is actually a really special boost for us. So thank you for your choice of guests. I appreciate getting a few minutes with Andy. The governor, by and large, has really been an outstanding leader and someone that is standing out on the national stage for how he's handling this. And I loved Andy's use of the phrase "in real time," because he really is just moving heaven and earth in real time. And we've really had, like Andy, we've got constituent issues that are significant to our communities. Lots and lots of folks impacted by the shutdowns, in particular in the hospitality industry here in Rogers Park and Edgewater and Andersonville, where our district is. Lots of folks have been hit by this. And so, we were pretty inundated trying to help folks navigate the unemployment system. And even that still hasn't caught up with the changes that have been made available via the federal relief bills. So still really bird dogging a lot of issues on behalf of our constituents, keeping up with the policy changes as they go. I used to describe what was happening in the administration last session as folks trying to drink from a fire hose. And the way that I'm seeing folks keeping up and staying engaged, not just within the governor's administration and the agencies, but our colleagues who each have their own special dumpster fires burning in their own backyards, and the ways we've been able to adapt, I've been really pleased to see. And I think we compare really well compared to states around us that maybe have lagged in their responses. As a caucus, we have met a few times virtually. There's not really a way for us to legislate virtually, so it's really coming down to figuring out, when that peak time is, when folks can be the most safe, but we can also get done the things that have to be done, the must pass. And so we're staying in touch as a caucus, and lots of us who've been involved in working groups around the building are still engaging in that same work. As an approps chair, and Andy is one of the budgeteers as well, looking at what we're going to have to change and adapt to make sure that we have a budget. And so staying in touch with our agencies and figuring out what impacts maybe we haven't contemplated yet that might be affecting some of the agencies that aren't front of mind when you're looking at what's happening on the ground every day. And so staying engaged on that, it has been a lot of the work. But I've also taken some time to talk to progressive colleagues about sort of how to strategize, how to think strategically in a post-COVID world as the policies that are having to be implemented as an emergency come into play. What is our strategy for what happens when it's no longer an emergency? If we're going to be able to get healthcare and housing to vulnerable populations in an emergency, how are we going to be able to undo that? And so what's the strategy to make sure that we don't pull the rug out from under folks afterwards, and thinking strategically as advocates and allies about how we make sure that some of the relief that comes doesn't disappear as the governor likes to say, when we get to the other side. And so I think that that's an important thing to reserve a little brain space for as legislators, but also to the folks at Equality Illinois as members of the progressive movement, to be able to have some strategies in place for when we get back together. The what to do. Everybody's doing it who's here, but stay home and make sure that we're enabling others to do so as well. Talked to a friend today who is very ill, suspects COVID, and instantly we all rallied. We're leaving things on his doorstep so that he can stay home. So make sure that you're reaching out to folks that that live alone and maybe are have a tendency to hibernate more than others. Make sure that we're staying in touch with those folks and getting help to them where we can. I am working with a coalition of Northside electeds to raise added funds for our neighborhood food banks. And so that's something that we've tried to build new infrastructure where maybe there wasn't before. And so I encourage others to do that as well. Watching closely the situation in our prison system. I think that's probably the most terrifying thing I'm seeing right now. We have, and again, something that impacts Andy's community as well. is some of our congregate care facilities like DOC, DJJ, and the developmental centers. Making sure that we're looking at best practices and implementing those. But you know, we currently have a pretty scary crisis at Stateville Prison, which houses many of our oldest inmates and sickest. And watching it move through that facility with alarming speed is something that definitely keeps me up at night, and trying to find solutions and make sure that we get there is top of mind. And with that, I think we could take all your questions.
Great. I will start with the first question or two. Again, if anybody has questions, please put them in the chat, and Emily will unmute as many of you as we can to ask your question directly. Before I do, I also want to do a shout out. I see Representative Yoni Pizer on, so thank you for joining us as well. I'm keeping scrolling through to see who else has joined us, but I will try to call out any other electeds who have joined us. I want to talk briefly about a specific piece of legislation, and I know there are massive pieces like the budget moving forward, but there is also the piece of legislation that would extend paid sick leave to more Illinois workers, and as part of that would allow for people to get paid sick leave when taking off to take care of members of their chosen family, not just blood or marriage family, but chosen family, which is so important to members of the LGBTQ community. Equality Illinois is playing a support role in a broader coalition for this bill. Senator Menard, I know you voted for this bill or a version of it last year. Representative Cassidy, I know you're a chief co-sponsor. Is there anything that our community can be doing to move this bill forward at this critical time?
Well, if I can jump in, I mean, it's a great example. It's as if that was a softball tossed up, right? This is a great example of one of those things that we have to keep our eye on, and recognize that the situation we're in, where folks are extending paid sick leave, where folks are being called to do so, being able to point to this as something that needs to remain in place is important. And how do we strategize around that? And so that, I think, is in the mix as we talk about what goes on the must pass list for any truncated session we might have, if that's how we end up doing things. So I do think that is in discussions, and I think it's important that we really push that forward and ensure that we're continuing to communicate with our legislators about issues, and you know, in the context of COVID. I will say advocacy is kind of low right now. You know, we're not getting a ton of volume and in terms of bill specific communication, and to some extent that's correct. You know, advocating about legislation that's not germane to what we're going through, I think is a little tone deaf by some organizations. And so I think that where it is something, this is a policy that needs to be implemented because of what we're doing, I think is a good message to share.
Brian,
Andy, you got anything to add?
Yeah, I would. I mean, Kelly, you hit the nail on the head with your opening comments, because whether it's paid sick leave or, well, let me back up. I think whether or not we can advocate right now, I think, is a question. There's so many other things going on, but we have to remember not to have short memories. You know, when this is over, and that's still an open question. When is this going to be over? We have to remember all of the things that people went through during this crisis. So whether it's access to paid sick leave, whether it's access to affordable health care, being able to go see a doctor when you need to see a doctor, or access to a safe workplace, or just access to the internet. I mentioned this earlier, but sending kids home through the school closure directive has amplified what is still in many places in the state, urban and rural, the lack of connectivity. So that when distance learning has to happen in times like this, it just cannot happen. So I think what I've said to folks here is, let's not forget about these things. We all knew these things had to happen before COVID-19. But some people now are focusing on them maybe for the first time, and I don't think that's an unfair statement, but maybe for the first time. So let's make sure that we remember these things and we continue that advocacy when this is all over, because paid sick leave, access to healthcare, access to a safe work environment, so nobody has to go to work in fear of getting sick, those types of things. That's what we should be advocating for when this is said and done.
Great. Thank you both. From here, I'm going to start taking questions from the group chat. I won't be able to get to everybody, but I'm reading through as we go. And as Brian mentioned at the top, I hope you all have a little grace with me about getting to your concerns. So first, Michelle Royal, you had the question that you submitted in here. Could you tell us your name, your pronouns, where you're calling from, and then ask the question to our senator and representative? I'm going to unmute you now.
Okay, so Michelle Royal, she, her, hers. Actually, today will be my 6th year of transitioning and 5 years since I came out publicly as a trans female. So I picked this day specifically. Look, I just dealt with my mortgage institute, which happens to be IH Mississippi Valley Credit Union, and they seem just unaware of what to do. I tried to do a skip a payment. I tried to stop the payment. It was real frustrating. Basically, the account that it comes out of, I just had to put a freeze on, and I will have to close that down. I'm just wondering if the governor or anybody's thinking about, talking to these institutions about, being a little bit more lenient. They want their payments. They're not even trying to work with mortgage owners. And I see a lot of houses that might go into foreclosure, and we might have a mortgage collapse again. And we all went through that once, and I don't think that we want to go through it again. And they got to understand that this is not fault of our own. We're not destitute. It's because I'm in the hospitality business as bars and restaurants are concerned, and I haven't been able to work since the 16th. So there's no income coming in. And what little bit of liquid cash I have, I need to save for food and some other necessities, or I won't survive through this whole thing. So what do you think we can do to get these lending institutes to work with the people?
Thank you, Michelle.
Andy, you want to go or you want me to?
Sure, I can go. Yeah.
Okay.
So Michelle, thanks for the question. I would tell you that of all the questions I get in my district offices, this is number one, or some variation of this is number one. So here's a couple of things. Number one, evictions have been suspended. Essentially have been suspended. So the legal process that a landlord goes through for renters, which doesn't sound like your particular circumstance, but evictions have been suspended. As far as mortgage payments go for lending institutions, that I don't know the direct answer on. I think it depends on several factors. What type of lending institution, in terms of time, in terms of licensure or professional regulation, whether it's a state bank, a federal bank, a credit union, all those things make a difference. But let's flip over to unemployment insurance. So there's a massive bubble happening right now at the Department of Employment Security, which is the state agency that is tasked with making sure that you have what you need to pay the bills that you have to pay, that you don't end up in a situation to where you are without housing or without food or without basic income through this crisis. So it would be an understatement to say that IDES, Department of Employment Security, is inundated with calls. I don't know if everybody saw that graph on the front page. I think it was on the New York Times, where it showed the bars of unemployment, and they hovered here for years, and then there was a bar that went up straight like this, and that was a reflection of the last week. That's happening, and it's real. And our state government is now equipped with a lot of tools to handle that through an expansion of unemployment insurance, through an expansion of WIC, through an expansion of all kinds of levers that we have that now have to be put into practice. So I would urge you to, I don't know if Representative Cassidy is your state representative, but urge you to contact your state senator and or your state representative to help you work through that IDES avenue, because it's real and it's working once you get through it. Hard to get through it, and we should acknowledge that in this conversation because of the volume. But more oftentimes than not, constituents that I represent that are going through the same circumstances that you are, Michelle, once they get there, they get a level of peace of mind that they were not expecting, because the old unemployment insurance program has been paused, and there's a brand new program that brings in a whole bunch of other people today. But on the mortgage question, I don't have an answer for that today. I'm struggling through that right now with constituents that I represent.
And just to add to that, I mean, this is a great example of where national leadership is missing. You know, the governor and the mayor have both talked about making direct contact with a lot of the bigger lenders in the area and asking them to have some forbearance, but there's really very little power state or local government has. As Andy said, there are some that are state chartered, and so there's a little bit more power over them. But it is piecemeal. There is a whole lot of, we've been gathering all of the resources and putting them on my website at repcassidy.com, but there are several grant funds for hospitality workers that have been displaced. The city has some emergency housing assistance money that they've freed up, not a lot, none of it's enough. It's 100% not enough. But so, you know, whether for Michelle in her particular circumstance or others, we've tried to gather, we've got all the fact sheets on IDES. They've asked people to stagger their application times based on their last names to try to help with the volume issues. So we've put all of that material up on my website so that folks can find what they need. And whether I'm your rep or not, I'm more than happy to troubleshoot your problem if you're having trouble getting in touch with anybody. So Michelle, wherever you live, shoot us an email and we'll get you sorted out to the best of our ability.
Thanks for that question, Michelle. I think that was on a lot of people's minds. Next, I'm going to go to Tim Jackson. Tim, if you could state your name, your pronouns, where you're calling from, and then read your question off for the legislators, we'd appreciate it. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Timothy Jackson, pronouns he, him, and his, representing the AIDS Foundation of Chicago. Just wanted to ask, once we finally, whenever that is, get to the other side of this issue, once the State Assembly reconvenes in Springfield, do we see both the House and the Senate focusing only on COVID-19 and the budget, or are we going to be looking at possibly business as usual? Thank you.
I think it's a little early to tell, to be honest with you. I think that it's more likely than not that we're going to be primarily focused on COVID-related, budget-related matters, because I think that it's going to be quite a while before we have any extended time together. You know, as I've heard it described, you know, trying to find a way to have as few people in the building for as little time as possible. Is still the mindset. So I think until we get to the other side, it's going to be hard to say for sure. But you know, I think that, you know, from an advocacy perspective, I think I would always look first through the lens of COVID related.
Yeah. And Timothy, thank you for, before I go to your question, thank you for your advocacy in Springfield on so many things. Especially issues related to healthcare and the bills that we've been able to advance. So I had to throw that in there. I would agree with Kelly. I think it's going to be focused on COVID response and budget first and foremost. I think it's a very narrow path, Timothy. It's a narrow path. I'll read everybody this just to give you a size and a flavor of what we're going to have to deal with coming up immediately with the budget. and this comes from our legislative revenue forecasting agency that predicts total cash receipts for the state will decline somewhere between 11% and 20% between this current fiscal year through July 1 through next fiscal year. So that amounts to anywhere from $4.5 to $8 billion. We're going to have to somehow right size in the budget somehow. Now put that up against what we all just talked about, which is the need to respond to COVID-19. You don't respond to this public health crisis by cutting our way out of it. We respond by investing more in healthcare, investing more in things that are community level health programs. That's how we deal with this in the short and long term. And those two things are going in opposite directions, less revenue, more spending. So we're going to have to right size those things. And that's going to take some very pointed, difficult work. That's why I think it's a narrow window.
Thank you, Senator Menard. Thank you, Timothy, for your question. Next, I'm going to head over to Maggie Trevor. Maggie, by this point, you probably know the drill. If you can read off your name, your pronouns, where you're calling from, and please share your question with the group. I'm going to unmute you now.
I'm Maggie Trevor. She, her, hers are my pronouns. I'm calling in from Rolling Meadows, which is in the northwest suburbs. And what I was asking was whether or not there's been any talk about aid to the uninsured and underinsured faced with cost of hospital care and surprise bills from out-of-network providers as a result of getting care for COVID-19. I'm worried that we're going to have a secondary wave of medical-related bankruptcies at the individual level and huge costs to county health systems from uncompensated care. And I think that's sort of a second wave of financial problems after unemployment. And I'm wondering whether or not there's been any talk at the state level of what this might look like and whether or not the state is planning on acting on any of this.
Yeah, I would tell you that within our caucus, the Senate Democratic Caucus, we've had discussions already about what is undoubtedly going to happen. I think we should just expect this to happen, unfortunately, given the lack of regulatory structure over insurance companies, their ability seemingly to just push the cost off on the patients and consumers. We know what they do. So we should just all expect this to happen. So let's go back to our previous conversation. Let's not forget it when the time comes to deal with it. And I think we should come up with collectively advocacy organizations, legislative list of things that we can do immediately when the time comes to make sure these things don't happen. The governor has taken some steps to expand state-covered health care for individuals in certain circumstances. I think there's some more work to be done there, but kudos to the Pritzker administration for getting that rolling. But this is going to be on our to-do list. There's no question about it. We know today, I'll give you an example in district I represent, not related to healthcare, but related to insurance. Any number of small business owners have paid into their insurance coverage for their small businesses in case of circumstances like this where they had this, cease operations. And I can't tell you how many small business owners I've heard from where insurance companies are saying, we're not going to pay you because a pandemic wasn't covered in your plan. So it's wordsmithing. We know that's happening. We know it's going to happen on the healthcare front. So I think there's two things. Deal with it on the front end to the extent that we can, and I think the administration has started that. But on the back end, we have to make sure that there's protections for patients and families who are going to go through undoubtedly these healthcare.
Yeah, I mean, that's very real. And he has relaxed some of the application and eligibility processes for accessing healthcare benefits, as well as like SNAP benefits and things like that. They've done a really good job of cutting through barriers to access. And just like with unemployment, I will say that the volume has been pretty intense for these departments. So, be patient. We will help where we can, but they are processing stuff as quickly as they can. And I just need to toss out there, Miles, you can't let Brian win the baby game. We need to see that baby too.
Great. Okay. I'm going to pivot really quickly. We're waiting on a couple folks have other comments, but they're going to let me know what specific questions they want to pose. But I'm going to turn to one of my favorites, Mike Ziri. He's got a couple questions on deck. Mike Ziri, do you want to ask anything of the legislators at the moment? I'm going to unmute you.
All right. Representative, Senator, thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you're both well, and thank you for your leadership for the crisis and now during the crisis. Just one question, with this new normal, how are you, I guess it's more like a poli-sci kind of question, how are your roles as legislators in your community different now than before this crisis? And number two, like, how are you communicating with your constituents now? What tools are you using, since you can't be in person at town halls and things like that? I'm just curious about that.
For my part, I think we have certainly increased our electronic communication. I used to send out one newsletter a week, barring anything extraordinary, sometimes during session too. And we've been doing it pretty much every other day as the news warrants. And it's been interesting because I've worried about volume, but I'm getting a lot of really positive feedback, and a lot of people who've been sharing the newsletters saying, somebody told me that your newsletter has the best on this stuff. Can I subscribe? So it's interesting that there seems to be a pretty significant thirst for more information. In terms of, like, I haven't yet done many things like this in a broad constituent outreach kind of way. We are working with both of our aldermen to do well-being calls. Our staff and our volunteers are using what would be campaign technology in a direct service way, doing well-being checks to seniors and folks in high need areas of the community. So I think that's been a big pivot, and I'm seeing that being used pretty widely. But in terms of figuring out yet, like how to replace the coffee with Kelly, where I would take over the corner coffee shop for 2 hours and, play Stump the DJ, people could ask me anything. I haven't really pivoted to that yet, because a lot of, I think both of us have talked about the influx of concerns and questions that are coming our way this early in this process. It's really felt mostly like living in a malfunctioning batting cage. You just keep swinging and hope you hit most of the balls. But I do think we have to start to contemplate, how do we continue to do sort of proactive outreach in this new normal.
Yeah, and Mike, I was just leaning over to tell Trista that you were on the screen there. So. Hello. She says, hey. So, Kelly, that's a good analogy. It's a good analogy, actually, about the batting cage. For me, it's been, here's what I don't want to do. I don't want to like overdo it and go too far. So what I've spent a lot of my time doing is just being on the telephone. I mean, it's like, I feel like I'm on the telephone 10 hours a day, literally, from things as granular as, I need my, I need a meal delivered, to St. Francis Hospital in Litchfield is out of face masks, and they have teams of people sewing them. So there's a whole lot of space in between those two things. And I spend the bulk of my time just fielding phone calls. I haven't done, this is the first type of thing that I've done to a broad audience. But I've done a lot on social media. And back to Michelle's question, this just came to mind. One of the first posts that I put up on my Facebook page dealt with how to sift through the maze of unemployment insurance. And that post was read almost 200,000 times on my Facebook.
Wow.
I'm happy and I hope I'm not revealing trade secrets, if somebody reads one of my, like 8,000 people read one of my Facebook posts, that's a lot. 200,000 people read that Facebook post. And that was a metric that showed that it's for real. And so I've tried to balance that, but mostly it's just telephone.
Great. Thank you both. Next up, I have a question from Jax. Jax, if you could share your pronouns and where you're calling from, and then your question, I'm going to unmute you now.
Thank you. My name is Jax West. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am in Lisle. And my question is, what is Illinois doing to protect our inmates in the prisons and jails? I am an advocate for the wrongfully accused, and I know that one of the prisons that my people are in, that there's so many cases throughout the prison that they're not reporting to the public, and it's very scary. So can you tell me, do you know what Illinois is going to do to protect them? Or, are we going to give them clemency? What is happening there?
So this has been a lot of my time trying to get a handle on this. There's been some good positive steps taken. The moms and babies have all been released, all the folks participating in that program. The pregnant women have all been released. The first, I was told, I've lost track of days, so I apologize, a couple of days ago, that the first 90 folks had been processed for early release, looking at folks with nonviolent, close to the end of their sentence, good disciplinary records while inside, for lack of a better description. So looking at those folks first and reviewing them for early release. I saw some reporting today, and I know I've had some conversations with the Prisoner Review Board that confirm this, that there have been they're canceling a lot of their hearings and not really contemplating doing them. There's not really, it doesn't seem to be a path for doing them in an alternative manner, and so that's deeply concerning. That one of the potential paths to exit might be closed. That you're referring to Stateville, I believe, when you talk about the facility with the most illnesses. There's a lot going on there, and a lot of members have been engaging. Senator Pat McGuire, who represents the area near Stateville, and his safety net hospital has already been overcome by inmates from Stateville. So there's a lot more that needs to be done, and I'm hopeful to have some good updates with more clarity on what the game plan is, or what the timeline is. I know what they're doing. It's just a question of what the timeline is, to try to get as many people out as possible, create adequate space so that folks who are sick can be separated from the folks that aren't sick. But it's a nightmare in any congregate care facility. And we saw both in Cook County Jail and in Stateville how very quickly it goes from that first case to a roaring fire. Andy, I know you deal a lot with this stuff too, so.
Yeah, and I think I had a conversation this morning with the county sheriff, and the same concerns are reaching county facilities too, which are of course not intended to be housing individuals for a long period of time. Some do, frankly, unfortunately, but this is reaching the county level as well. And I think this is a good time for us to remind ourselves that part of the preparation that wasn't done by the federal government, which is making tests available, widespread testing available, is having an impact in so many places, including correctional facilities. In a perfect world, and I'm not a doctor, I'm not an expert in this, but in a perfect world, we would just test everybody, and we would make decisions that way. But we don't have that ability today because the federal government didn't make preparations in order for that to happen. So I would just tell you, I think the state's on top of it. I think it's an incredibly challenging situation. I think there's more to come on this, but you're right to bring it up as a concern. It's a concern for all of us in the legislature, and I think we'll see more on this from the administration in the coming days.
Thank you, and thank you, Jax, for that question. Okay, given time, I'm gonna, we have 2 questions left. It's gonna be, Senator and Representative, a zoom out question and then a zoom in question. So the first one is the zoom out question, and it's from Jay Marcos Peterson. Jay, if you could share your pronouns, where you're calling from, and please read your question to the legislators. I'm gonna unmute you now. Oh. Let's see, I'm gonna try to unmute you now. Sorry, one moment. There you go. Okay, I think we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Hi, everyone. It's Marcos Peterson. I reside in Lincoln Park in Chicago. A lot of my business has been self-employed, and 100% of my contracts have been now postponed. And I am a self-employed, individual, just myself. And I know the federal government has said that, there's unemployment for people who are self-employed and things like that. How have you guys worked with IDES in moving forward, helping individuals? For example, I have now 0 income coming in because my contracts have been postponed, and I'm in the marketing events industry, so no events from any of the clients are happening right now. So I don't know what y'all have worked with IDES, your constituents, or what you have heard, how the state of Illinois is helping individuals such as myself.
Yeah, so Marcos, I'll go first on this one. IDES, I'll just read them. I might struggle because my asthma is giving me fits today, but Kelly mentioned there's certain days for filing. Excuse me. Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday are names with letters A through M. One second. Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday, letters A through M. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, letters N through Z. And Saturday is anybody. So that's the online. So adhere to that. That's what we would tell you.
And as I understand it, the system doesn't yet reflect the federal change allowing for 1099 and gig folks. And I think that I heard yesterday that it's, within the next day or 2, they're supposed to be able to retool the system to allow for proper application. But again, that would be, if you go to repcassidy.com, those guidances are up there. But it required as Andy described it, it's a whole new unemployment system at this point. And it required a complete retooling. And I think that they still have not yet been able to accept those claims, but it's coming in the next day or 2, as I understand it.
Great, thank you. So the second question that we had left was from Ryan. And Ryan was asking actually about the same system. I saw Ryan react to Marcos's question. So I think the information we shared might have covered what we started to ask there. And with that, we're going to wrap it up. I really appreciate Representative Cassidy and Senator Menard for joining us today, and all of you for being here. Again, our goal with this series is to provide information and resources for everybody. So you will see an email coming from me with the opportunity for you to give Equality Illinois feedback on this first run of the Town Hall series. Next week at the same time, Tuesday, 1:30 p.m. to 2:30 p.m., we will be doing a new town hall specifically around healthcare that will be featuring Illinois Planned Parenthood CEO Jennifer Welch, as well as a senior leader from Howard Brown Health. Same format, pending your feedback. If we need to make a couple tweaks, we will. But we hope you'll join us for that. Same idea, you need to RSVP on the link we send out, and then I will send out the Zoom info. I really appreciate all of you for being here today, and I hope to hear your thoughts on how it went soon. But other than that, thank you. Thank you so much. We will be in touch. Bye.